This is kind of a weird format for one of these support weekend questions, but we are definitely still doing the same kinds of things as always. We need to support the claim, and they're just saying, basically you're going to make up quotes, and one of the quotes is going to relate to the claim. So first, let's figure out the claim. American fashion designer Patrick Kelly was known for his love of colorful buttons. Many of his signature dresses feature bold assortments of buttons throughout the garment. In a paper, here we go, a fashion design student claims that Kelly's use of buttons as decoration was inspired by his childhood observations of the styles and actions of the women in his family. So basically, the claim is he's inspired by the women in his family. Okay, so let's just see. Does anything relate to that? A, although some of the assortments of buttons appear to be mismatched pieces scattered randomly throughout Kelly's dresses, his most famous designs feature carefully crafted patterns of matching buttons. Nothing about his inspiration, nothing about women in his family. Choice B. Many of Kelly's contemporaries were inspired by his designs to incorporate buttons, as well as zippers and snaps as decorative items in their work. Well, there's inspiration for sure, but it's not Kelly getting inspired, it's other people. I don't care about them, I care about this person, so get rid of that too. C. Kelly's grandmother, who would repair clothing when he was a child, frequently added mismatched buttons to the clothes to draw attention away from any flaws in the garments. Well, it's talking about a woman in his family, so that's great, but notice it's not talking about inspiration directly. So you could do a couple things here. You could just move on and see what D sounds like, or you can go back to the passage and be like, are they somehow talking about being inspired without, right? So let's look at D. Let's kind of take a little bit of a breather here and just be like, all right, they talk about a woman in his family, they're talking about him, so, maybe this is right. Let's look at D. Kelly was destined to be a designer from a young age. He learned how to sew clothing from his Aunt Bertha, and his love of drawing was developed by his mother, so same thing, right? Inspired by other people. So what's the difference then between these two situations, these two kind of examples? Well, we're talking specifically about his use of buttons, right? And what did they say about his use of buttons, right? And a bold assortment of buttons throughout the garment, right? So he's using just random buttons. Now, which choice is about the buttons? Well, certainly C is, right? And they say mismatch, so that's an assortment. And that seems to be, close enough of a match that I could at least keep that choice in. Now, for D, we're talking about how he sews and drawing, but we're talking about his clothes, so that part doesn't interest me. The sewing, maybe I can make a connection. But here's the thing. Which one is easier to connect back, right? Which one has more matches with the things that are going on in the passage? It's C. And yes, I could have gone back when I was evaluating C originally and maybe drawn that connection, but it's okay to just move on to another choice and just be like, all right, this choice is good enough. If I need to do more work, I will. Let me just see what the other one is. Sometimes in like a case like this, D will be just so obviously wrong that you're like, well, it can only be C anyway. So you're just kind of done, and you don't have to do that extra step of proving that next piece of the story. But here we did have to do that, but that's okay, because what we really did is we focused on the idea of a wedge, right? We used this inspired by women thing as a filter. If a choice was not talking about how he was inspired, Patrick Kelly was inspired, then we got rid of it. And that got rid of two choices. And then we see with the two that are remaining, what can we do to kind of drive them apart? What makes them different from each other? And talking about sewing doesn't interest me as much as talking about buttons, because the buttons are what's in the passage. But it wasn't as obvious that C was right. They didn't use that word inspired, whereas I would say D is definitely more of a trap. They're trying to get you because they're listing two women destined to be a designer. He learned how to sew. Like it's much more just trying to focus on that part of inspiration. But we need to go back and recognize that specifically this button thing is what he was inspired by. So make that match as well, and both things check off in C, and we can kind of force it in. And there you go. That's how we get answers when we do have two that are similar.